Just wanted to start recording and also let Heather know that I'm going to move her up to the panel because her item is the first item on the agenda.
All right, very good. Okay, so let's call this meeting of the Comp Plan Implementation Committee to order. Roll call shows that Councilors Grenier, Osher, Perry, and Robertson are here, as well as myself. And item number 2 is contract or conditional zone request for 61 Margin Street. And I assume I'm throwing it to our town planner, Kyle Drexler. Kyle?
Hi, everyone. So we got a request from Abe and Heather, or the official property owner in this case is Hub LLC, for the property at 61 Margin Street, and which now includes, I guess, part of or is considered 73 Margin Street. It's kind of a newly acquired piece of land next to it that adds a few acres to the existing property where Orono Brewing Company is. And what they're looking to do is change the zone from medium density residential district to commercial district that would make what they're already doing on the property a legally conforming use, because right now it's considered legally non-conforming, it's grandfathered. The previous use of that site and the adjacent site, which it was divided from, was like the gravel extraction type of use. So a few years ago, the planning board made a finding that the brewery, considered light industry, with some potential office space or studio space, was, less of an impact, or no greater adverse impact was there than the previous use. So that's kind of what enabled the transition from one non-conforming use to another one. But as a non-conforming use, it makes expansions and things on the property a little more difficult. You just have to take into account more things. And so they're looking to, kind of convert the zone to probably the commercial 1 district, as that's most likely what would allow what they currently do and what they want to do in the future. The comprehensive plan, when we talk about, these zone change requests and, kind of the uniqueness of it, the comprehensive plan specifically recommended that this property and the overall kind of, larger property that it came from would be considered for a conditional zone. And I think it specifically, I go over this in the report, I think it specifically mentions conditional zone versus contract zone, because it's kind of been a long-standing, commercial or industrial use within the town. It's not a situation where we have a residential property owner looking to convert their property into like a small scale restaurant or office space. So it's easy just to do a contract and say, yeah, you can do, your residential use and just add on that little extra bit. This is a kind of a bigger change and more of a intent from the town, I think, to consider this as a commercial property going forward. And I think the conditional zone approach makes that easier than a contract zone, which is why I think it was in the comp plan and as well as my recommendation. But yeah, so I think, I'm sure the applicant can go into more detail about what they want to do, but I think in general, it was just at a future time expanding some of the manufacturing and storage space for what they already do. There were no specific plans, I think, right at the moment, but this is more just a kind of preemptive change to make things easier and more efficient in the future when they are ready to expand.
Kyle, are you ready for a question?
Yep, absolutely.
I'm not sure I fully understand the difference between a conditional zone and a contract zone.
Right. So a contract zone, we draft a separate document. We have a template, and it sort of outlines the contract agreement and signed by both the town and the applicant, and then it's recorded with the property at the registry of deeds. And to me, this is better used for small scale things. Like most recently, we had the 117 Mill Street, where it's a 3-story building. It's a the building, the uses that building is capable of don't really fit in with what's allowed in the surrounding district. So it makes sense to kind of isolate that property and give it a contract and just say, well, you can have an extra dwelling unit and you can have some office space or commercial space on the first floor. But a conditional zone, we actually write into the ordinance. It's a ordinance amendment. So it adds language into Article 4 of our land use ordinance. So it's really creating a new zoning district, but we use an existing zone as sort of a foundational piece and then add standards on top of that. So I think it makes it easier for a bigger scale project or property, where if the current property owners with this or any other conditional use property ever decided to sell their property, you would have this kind of established mini zoning district just for this lot built into the ordinance. So you would have a list of land uses that were allowed on this property. You would have all the additional performance standards built into the ordinance. So it's really a matter of whether it's an agreement between the town and the applicant, and then recorded with the registry of deeds and is sort of out of sight, or if it becomes a piece of the actual ordinance, which I think then the town has more individual control over going forward.
I can
But-
ask a quick follow-up question to that. The cost of a contract zone, like the whole legal process, falls to the property owner, and it's kind of a cost. It's an expensive process, relatively speaking. Are there similar costs associated with the conditional zone, or is it fairly routine work for staff? So like, how does it compare in terms of that?
Right, so the contract zone, there's a total of $3,500 of fees up front, but then $2,000 of that is put into an escrow and can be returned after the fact if it's not used. Conditional zone would just be like any other ordinance amendment we do. It would be entirely on the staff side of things. And I think that's because there's, kind of getting to was that it's not, although the current applicant or property owner may be the one initiating the conversation, that the change could benefit the town in general going forward. It wasn't specific to that property owner. It's more acknowledged by the town that this is the right thing and right direction for the lot. So that's why it's more initiated on the town side, and the applicant has, I think, less of a burden.
And would it be accurate to say that if the town determined that a slightly different use would be more beneficial to the town, we'd have more flexibility than in a contract zone?
Sophie, did you want to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say you have more flexibility. However, the current use that's
Right.
happening in so if you amend a conditional zone down the line and they have built out to the current conditional zone, they are now legally able to operate. You're not ever gonna change
Yeah,
what they're
I'm
doing.
I'm mostly talking about, so every time we even talk about a contract zone, like the first thing I think about is the future, like what if the property owner sold the property, is basically like, if
Yeah,
we agree with the current use and we like the current use, but we have to think about the long term if that property gets sold. So I guess it's more of a question of if it were to change hands, or if it were, you know, in the future down the line.
yep. And the conditional zone in this particular circumstance would give you more flexibility, but it also, when a property owner comes to us, especially in my experience with the Firths, they are ready. When they come to us, they have an idea, they are ready to execute. And the 3 months that it would take to put a contract in place, I think would be very detrimental. So the conditional zone would allow us to we would work with them still, to make sure that, we're talking about kind of the breadth of potential uses and how they might interplay with the neighborhood. But if we adopt it 30 days after that, at any point, they can come in and either just do a planning board or a code office permit process, which is a lot easier for a developer to do.
I have a question too. I have two questions, and one of my questions is this is a TIF district, correct? Like a TIF. So does changing the zoning impact any of that? Okay, so that's not an issue. That's a non-issue. And then my other question when I read this was, do the residents need to be notified of this change at all?
Yeah, so state law would require any contract or conditional zone that the abutting properties be notified. Also, you know, our own standards when the ordinance change, you know, when it went to the planning board and the council, it would be notified as well. We would notify the abutting properties during the planning board process, so.
And can they object to that at all? Would that come up at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, they're notified so that they can provide public comment during
Feedback?
the public hearing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a real important part of it, because that property for a long time was a nuisance to the neighbors, and we heard a lot of complaints about it when it was operated as a cement mixing plant and a gravel extraction plant. And I know the neighbors were very happy to see this new use. And so I'm sure they'd be interested in what's happening there.
Don't forget
Yeah,
gravel crushing plant.
yeah, a big part of the drafting the conditional use language will be, you know, if we use the commercial one as the base district, it would be, you know, we've already started preliminary talking about it with the property owners, but really looking at all of the potential uses in the district and kind of narrowing it down to get rid of the ones that would not fit in with that, you know, kind of neighborhood or area at all. You know, what they're trying to do to make sure that, you know, it still fits their needs, and, you know, potentially allows things of an even smaller scale that maybe the town would be comfortable with it, you know, one day in the future if things changed.
And when we purchased this property, we purchased it with the dedication to staying in Orono for the lifetime of the business and ourselves. And we planned on using the property exactly how we are. And then we thought that in the future, if we needed to increase production, it would make sense to do it right here in Orono. And then when we were able to purchase some more acreage just to make sure that we had that option, we did that despite the fact that we hadn't had this final assurance yet, because we wanted to make sure that we had the acres to expand on if need be. And just to be really upfront about what our potential for outgrowing this space would be, brewing brewing a batch of OBC beer takes a day, but fermenting it takes 2 weeks. So we are maxed out with fermentation space currently. So if we wanted to be able to continue to react to the demand for the beer, we could potentially need to add to the square footage of our building to make space for more fermenters. That wouldn't have an impact on our neighbors. We'd still have a truck coming, once a day to pick up the beer, and we'd still be, the same noise level and the same visual, except for another, building beside our other building. So what we're looking at is really just an extension of what we're already doing, but just making sure that we don't ever outgrow Orono and that we're able to stay where we are because we love it there and it's something we've dedicated ourselves to. And when we purchased that property back in 2017 or whenever it was, I will admit that we didn't know that we weren't actually, that it was complicated to potentially add on to it. We had the extra acres and we thought that it was probably a potential at the moment, and we were not fully informed on that just internally. So this is something we're just trying to look at in the future. We're not up against it this moment, and we're not going to try to start construction next year or next month, but we just want to make sure we're planning ahead, and that when it does come time that we need to start figuring out how to increase fermentation space, we're able to do that without having it be some sort of emergency. So we're really just trying to keep doing what we're doing and make sure we can stay right where we are because we love it.
Counselors have any questions for Abe and Heather, for Kyle?
Kyle, just to be clear, we're talking about the 2 lots that the Firths currently own, not the entire parcel that it was previously owned by the company. Correct.
Yeah, right now it's a total of about 7 to 8 acres. So I believe the whole parcel was over 30 acres. So.
You can just go ahead, Lori.
Okay, this letter requests a commercial 1 district zone, and Kyle's discussion has been about this conditional zoning. So what's the difference there?
So the conditional zone or a contract zone isn't its own zoning district. It needs to start with one of our other base zoning districts. So in this case, conditional 1, and then from there it can become more strict. So most likely, we would use the commercial 1 district here because the commercial 1 district allows light industry as a use, which is what their current use is, under our ordinance at least. And then from there, we could kind of tailor it to meet the specific location. So there might be certain commercial 1 uses, that in our normal commercial 1 area closer to, the interstate and Stillwater Ave, where it's not as much of a residential area, that are, okay to operate out there and don't cause, many impacts. But in this area with more of, the MDR, bordering it on some sides, we might want to limit certain uses that would normally be allowed in the C1, or we might want to put on Sophie, I think you just started sharing your screen.
You're sharing your email.
So you're saying that instead of just meeting their request and turning this into a commercial one, that the conditional zoning would be so that we would turn it into something that has many similarities to commercial one, but is not as commercial one.
Right. So that's how, so certain other contract zones might utilize the C2 as its base zone, but then you might limit the potential C2 uses. Or you might say, okay, this is the C1, but we're going to limit the total building footprint square footage on the lot because, we don't want the entire lot to be developed as much, or we're going to require an additional buffer, vegetated buffer, or things like that are what become possible through the conditional aspect of it. So it's changing the zone to one of our base zones, but it's then adding in additional standards to whatever the level is to kind of make it work for everyone involved.
So what Sothi had mentioned is when the Firths come to the town with ideas for economic and business development, that they're usually quite fully formed. So given that that comment from her years of working with them, I guess I'd like to ask the Firths why it was that they were requesting a commercial one, because as a counselor, I want to respond to what my constituent has requested, and that's what you requested. So tell us why that was your request.
So we requested commercial one at Kyle and Dave Mylan's suggestion, because light industry is already included in commercial one, which is what we're doing. And because we're an allowable non-conforming with our district situation at the moment, they suggested what would make actual sense for what our business and industry is on that piece of property. So we didn't pick it out of a hat. They suggested commercial one for us.
So then Kyle, so why isn't it just commercial one?
I think that
why not just rezone to commercial one?
Yeah.
Well, the comprehensive plan specifically recommended doing a conditional use because there are no commercial one zoned areas kind of in the, that residential MDR area of town. Most of our only really commercial one area is along Stillwater Ave, where the University Mall is, and that area. Commercial one as a district allows a lot of different things, from light industrial to shopping centers to movie theaters to all sorts of commercial, large scale commercial uses that are potentially sort of impactful to a residential neighborhood. So the idea was to have the comp plan recommend it as a conditional use, recognizing that it would benefit from being converted to a commercially zoned property, but also recognizing that the surrounding area wasn't necessarily all commercial, and that the town may want to put in some kind of conditions and safeguards of how it's the scale and the level of which it's fully developed in the future.
So, and then right across the now non accessible bridge, it's zoned for economic development. Right? Or
It's zoned as industrial. Yeah.
Industrial. So if we went to because I'm all for simplification, and I'm also all for making zones that allow the people who own property there to do what they see as a vision for them to invest and make businesses that then are a good return for them and for the town as far as the tax base. So being that I like the idea of simplification and giving people who are owning property the options, and the fact that it's right across the way from some place that we are going to encourage industrial development. When I read the preparation for this, all I said is, well, why wouldn't it just be commercial one? And so thanks,
Lori,
Heather, for saying that you got that from the town. So I guess it means that no, so I guess my question is why not just let it be? And then, yeah, because if someone comes in to develop that island and put a bridge in, right now they have the possibility of doing something not particularly residential friendly.
Lori, it's very much like what we do with contract zones where we talk about, okay, the therapy practice we were discussing the last time. Okay, this business model is great. We like what they want to do with the property, but with the contract zone, what they're allowed to do then follows the property, whether they're there or not. Having this base layer be the commercial one zone means we start with those standards, but then we can add additional standards that we may not add to Stillwater Mall because of the fact that there are residential properties right there next door to this facility. So it's not like making things more complicated for no reason. It's being responsive to the actual location of the property and making sure that we're zoning it in a way that fits in with the neighborhood, because we have to care about what the neighbors are going to experience, and nobody's fixing that bridge or developing that island right now, but people are living next door. You yourself live next door to that property. So
I live there, and I far prefer the sound of music coming up into my yard than the dust from crushing rocks coming into my yard. I'm really glad that they're there, and I thought from when I read the comprehensive plan last cover to cover, which was when I was running the first time for office, so it's been a few years, I thought that the comprehensive plan also encouraged not use the conditional zoning so much. So
The townwide zoning map has specific properties outlined and marked as being, useful and ripe for contract or conditional zoning. And that's what this property was, one of those, which is the real basis for it. It was part of that process along with a few others in town that were specifically called out for as being good opportunities for conditional zones. Whereas
well,
it's
yeah,
saying that
whoever made a zoning map and took a brownfield or basically a very, very altered landscape and put that map to be MDR, like when no one was going to develop that for medium density residential when there's other places that are not so impacted. So it was not mapped in a way that made sense. So of course, then you need to put a spot symbol on it and say, well, this isn't really going to be MDR, so it's ripe for conditional zoning since it's already a gravel pit.
So
Yeah, I just like to simplify.
I just
simplify and give more options to the people who have the land.
I think the recommendation, Kyle, from you folks was a very good one. I'm very supportive of the conditional zone. I think Abe and Heather have been wonderful members of our community. What they've done has been first class, and I'm very supportive of their request and the direction that you have suggested they go in.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Agreed. Yeah.
I think this is great. And I think, it'd be wonderful if Ayers Island gets developed at some point, but that's a long way down the road. And I also like the idea of, speaking of down the road, making sure we do this in the right way. So if OBC ever were to move out, not that I ever anticipate that, it certainly wouldn't be OBC if it was out of here. And I just can't imagine. Plus, because we know how dedicated you guys are too, and not just with the business, but everything for the community. But if there was that, I think it would be a huge mistake to leave the gate open for something, to make sure you don't get more gravel dust, Lori, blowing up the ravine towards you. So this is, or anything else, or a chicken processing plant, or who knows what, right? There's lots of fun things. So absolutely support this. And Kyle, well done again with your presentations and really sort of spelling this out for us so it's easy for us to understand this.
I'd like to say too that that I support Abe and Heather, and I really like the fact that you have a big picture side of things, that you look at things ahead of time, you know, and anticipate what's coming up. And that makes everything, for me, that makes everything more simple, because you know what you want. And I like that you guys know how to do that, and you do it very well. So yes, I'm in support.
Yes, it's common enough to have people who own businesses or want to do development of some kind, you know, be cagey about like, will I buy this property? Will the town do this for me? Da, da, da. Like, it's rare to have business owners that are like, well, we're going to buy the property and we hope that it works out. And, you know, I know that I don't think they need to demonstrate their commitment to the community. I think that's well demonstrated, but it is nice to see. It sounds like the majority of folks are very receptive to this and are, you know, interested in moving it forward. Unless there's any other outstanding questions or things. Oh, Sophie?
Kyle, can you just take us through very quickly the timeline so that everybody's on the same page and what to expect next?
Sure. So next, I guess I would begin, you know, with communicating with Abe and Heather, and then, you know, drafting some, you know, draft language for the conditional use zone. You know, it should be, like I said, an amendment to our zoning ordinance. So working with them to kind of figure out specifically the scope of, you know, I guess what they're thinking. We'll keep narrowing down the uses that would want to get, you know, allowed in there going forward, and any, you know, kind of standards that might jump out as, you know, being super obvious that we'd want to include or limit, you know, so not necessarily for what they're proposing, but if any other kind of C1 use went in there. So then once that draft was ready, I imagine it would come back to committee for discussion and review, and we'd have that conversation. And then, you know, from there, it would start the, you know, kind of planning board council adoption process once it was ready. So depending on feedback and comment, you know, that'll really be the tell of how long of a time frame it'll take.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Okay, thank you, Abe and Heather.
Thanks, Deb and Heather. I just want to say it's I loved working with you guys. I'll see you soon.
Yeah. You.
Take care.
Bye-bye, thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda. I have to scroll back up to the top of my agenda. Ooh, okay. Guidelines for considering contract or conditional zone requests, item number 4.
We had item number 3. Did you want to skip it? Okay.
No, I didn't scroll up far enough, I guess, in my agenda. Okay.
I just
item
want to
number
put
3.
Kyle on the hot seat as long as possible.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can skip it if we want.
Understanding the balance of comp plan goals and objectives. Kyle?
Sure. So I will share my screen, try to keep it somewhat. Oh. Okay. All right, can everyone see the presentation? Yep, all right. So this is just kind of a more general presentation look at the comprehensive plan goals and you know, how it really balances the different, you know, goals, objectives that it came up with. You know, there's a lot in the comprehensive plan. It looks at a lot of different things. And sometimes we run into these kind of contradictions. So how does that all play out, and how is that really looked at and considered during the comprehensive plan process? So this will hopefully shed some light on that. So, you know, a comprehensive plan process, you know, as you know, I'm sure we all know, just in general, is more in depth than let's say, amending an ordinance. When we look at an ordinance amendment, recently we've been talking about the solar ordinance, for instance. We do we do a lot of these steps kind of outlined here, right? We define an issue, we set a vision for, what's expected in the town. We consider the different options. We, research best practices, all that sort of stuff. And then we come up with some draft language where we, basically choosing an option or a policy. And then we go through, implementing that. And, public involvement, while the public can come to the committee meetings and offer some comments, the public hearings happen at the end, and that's where, we'd be getting the majority of our feedback from the public. With a comprehensive plan, though, each of these stages is going to routinely have public involvement. So right from the very beginning, because I think it's an important distinction between the two, where, when you're defining an issue or the problem, and then, you're getting public involvement on that issue or problem, you're making sure right from the get-go that what, you think is the issue or the problem is the same as what, community members think, whether it's residents or business owners. And each step of the way, you're kind of getting that confirmation as far as, what you're looking at and what you're thinking is actually, being, matched and agreed upon, with the public. So, the process for our most recent comprehensive plan update, began in 2012. There was a committee established that met monthly for 2 years. And, those meetings were all open to the public. And then the committee conducted 5 public forums along the way. So like we were talking about, they kind of, met on each of those stages. They had, dedicated public forums for thinking about the issues and opportunities, dedicated meetings for developing the policies and actions, and then, kind of overview of the whole thing towards the end. And then afterwards, there was an online survey to take a look at additional pieces, and, public hearings as it began the adoption process. So the benefits of a comprehensive plan and what it really brings over just, looking at single issues or topics that we amend through, just our regular ordinance amendments, is a comp plan allows a community to identify all of its goals along with the existing conditions of the community so that you can strike a balance. And you're able to examine the impacts of any kind of recommended action or policy change across multiple areas. So, you have this whole collection of information that you've gathered on a number of different areas, from environment, population, economy, transportation, and you're considering all of those things throughout the whole process. Whereas when you're looking at, a singular ordinance change, some of those things are in your mind, but it's not on an equal playing field. You're focused on this one thing, and then, all this other stuff is kind of, down below. And it's really a chance for, the planners involved, public officials, and community members to discuss any compatibilities and points of conflict among the different goals and policies. So our current comprehensive plan is broken down really into these categories. You have population, households and housing, economy, natural, scenic, and historic resources, land use, transportation and utilities, parks and recreational facilities, and municipal finance. And, what's, the key thing to remember with a comprehensive plan is these are all interconnected. When you affect one, you're most likely going to affect at least a few of the other ones. It's very rare that, you have an issue solely dedicated towards one of these categories and can be fixed without, also impacting in some way some of the other ones. So I won't go through each one of these specifically because I don't think it's really the point of the presentation, but I put it there just to kind of outline. So each one of those kind of categories in the comprehensive plan was broken down into the issues and opportunities within each one. So things like recognizing there's a decline in family-aged households, or there's a large college-age population, or transitioning the downtown area to more of a specialty district. Moving on, with our resources, preserving and promoting scenic and historic resources, or the ability to create more flexibility on the Main Street corridor, converting it from an area that's just residential to an area that can be used for some commercial uses as well. And then we have our transportation and utility issues and opportunities, and our parks and rec facilities issues and opportunities. Designing an accessible, safe street network, expanding bus service, using the town's recreational assets as an economic draw. This was the list. If we go back to where was it? If we go back to the stages, the first kind of, stage there, defining the issues and the problems. So this is what our comprehensive plan has defined as those issues. So from there, what the comprehensive plan aims to do is set goals. So again, there's sort of an overarching goal for each category. So home to a growing population representing, different ages, ethnicities, walks of life, to grow a diverse economy built on innovation in new and legacy industries, to protect water quality and conserve natural resources, to enable appropriate residential and commercial growth within the town's designated growth area, develop and maintain a transportation network that's safe and efficient for both, I think vehicles and people, utilizing kind of multimodal transportation, provide open spaces close to where residents and employees and students live and work, and to finance infrastructure necessary for public health and safety. So those are kind of generalized goals. So you have the specific identified issues, then you have these general goals for each category. But so how do you prioritize goals and avoid conflicts when coming up with solutions for each one of those? So this is where, I think difficult part really works, because a lot of the times we look at single issues that we've identified and, think of a quick fix that would solve that one issue, without necessarily thinking of the ramifications it has on all those other different areas that we were, just thinking about. So for instance, if we go back a few slides and we talk about, a downtown or, university related opportunities for commercialization. So, and in other places, we talk about expanding the village commercial in the comprehensive plan. So, okay, let's say we expand the village commercial. Well, now to expand the village commercial, you have to get rid of properties in the medium density residential district. So, but one of your other goals is to provide more housing opportunities for people. And now you're taking away housing opportunities and turning it into potential commercial properties. A gap in housing for low and moderate income households. I think this is something that, we've discussed a lot lately, with our recent kind of MDR and village residential discussions. You have this idea of creating more housing opportunities, but if you look at, creating more housing opportunities as the only goal, you're going to create problems elsewhere because you're taking away, the idea of, maybe the scenic and historic resources, or you're taking away from, providing enough commercial opportunities, or, you're, at some point, if you just made the whole community dense residential development, right, it wouldn't be very walkable because there would be nowhere to walk to. So, it puts more of a burden on transportation infrastructure and utilities and things like that. So the idea is that, to avoid conflicts, the comprehensive plan looks at the big picture. And by outlining all of those existing conditions in the community, and identifying all of the issues up front, then goals can be set that are specific to the community. And then when you take those goals into consideration, you can develop specific policies and options to tackle those goals. But the thing is, at this point, you've now taken a broad overview of all of the aspects of the community. So when you're developing these policies and recommended options to tackle these certain issues, you're inherently taking into consideration all of the facets of the community. So, for instance, with our village residential overlay district, if you were just looking at the idea of providing more housing opportunities, you might say, okay, just allow denser levels of housing and allow multifamily structures to go into all residential districts, because that would provide a lot more housing opportunities. That would solve that problem. But through the comprehensive plan, we've already identified that student housing in our existing residential neighborhoods has been a problem in the past, creating nuisances, and it potentially decreases the housing stock for owner occupants. So the village residential overlay kind of takes all of that into consideration at the same time, while it's acknowledging this issue of providing more housing opportunities. It's also looking at all these other things that the comprehensive plan has informed us on. And through that, you're able to come up with a recommendation that kind of avoids focusing too much on one area, and kind of balances it's what it's doing between multiple goals across the comprehensive plan. So that's kind of one example result of comprehensive planning was the village residential overlay, but I put in a couple other examples here of how the comp plan aimed at really balancing the different goals that are outlined in the comp plan. How do you weigh those? Is economy more important, or is housing more important, or is walkability more important, open space? I think some of these kind of outline how that balancing works. So the Main Street office overlay, for instance, it balances maintaining the existing residential character of the Main Street corridor there as you enter town, but it's also providing small scale commercial opportunities, which was another kind of aspect identified by the plan as something missing. But at the same time, it's preserving the historic character of some of those structures on the street. So, if you were to say that, we just need to allow more economic opportunities on Main Street, you might not take all of that into consideration. You might lose some of the residential character, you might lose some of the historic feel, but because the comp plan is sort of looking at all of it, you're able to come up with a recommended strategy with the overlay that kind of aims to accomplish all of it. Another good one is our accessory dwelling units standard. The idea of, in town, you can't in general have two principal structures on a single lot. But through accessory dwelling units, you can create additional affordable housing opportunities. But at the same time, you're promoting infill development that helps to protect natural resources elsewhere and more efficiently utilize infrastructure. So you're allowing these kind of small scale dwelling units to go on lots where single family homes already exist. It promotes infill development, it promotes efficiency of our existing resources. But at the same time, those are houses that don't get built maybe somewhere else on an undeveloped piece of land, and that undeveloped piece of land can stay undeveloped and vegetated, and can be used to protect natural resources or scenic resources in the town. So it's all, it's really a balancing act. So quick overview, the comprehensive plan tries to take a holistic approach that acknowledges the interconnectedness between all facets of a community. It's goes through an in-depth public involvement process along the way, so each step is considered appropriately. And then comp plans work as a safeguard against quick solutions that may have a wider impact than initially considered. I think that's, that really sums up the benefit of utilizing one and why they're so important for a community. So happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Do folks have questions?
I like this, the way that you laid this. Where's Kyle? He's switched places. The way that you laid this out, Kyle, it looks like a good training kind of tool as well. And I wish that I had had a better grasp of. I mean, I have a grasp of the comp plan, but I think this kind of turns it into something that's comprehensible and comprehensive, but at the same time, you can understand, because you can understand the document a little bit better. It's a huge document. It's hard to take in all at the same time. So thank you for that. I like it, but it does feel like a great kind of a great training for new people coming in as well on council.
For the public as well, because I think sometimes the public says, well, I know because I am a nerd and I talk about the comp plan a lot, and people are like, what is comp plan? Well, it's on the website and you should probably look at it. But yeah, that was very, very informative, very interesting. And I think it's a good reminder of how much of a balance all of this is, because it's easy, I think, for us to get really focused down on like one specific issue or one thing that's brought before council. But the charge of this committee is really to be thinking about the larger picture. And fortunately, Kyle's very good at shepherding us in that direction with these presentations. Any other comments, questions? Folks ready to move along? All right, now this time I'm going to read the right item, which is item number 4, guidelines for considering contract or conditional zone requests.
So I have taken the general conversation that I think we had the last time we talked about having some guidelines, and put them down in kind of an outline form. I have not yet given this to Kyle to do his magic to make it flow with planner speak. But my goal here was to get down the general idea of what we had been talking about and to get some feedback before I put this through the staff process to formally develop guidelines and application, 2 applications, the application for the pre-application and the application for the contractor conditional zone. So do you want me to give any more feedback? Do you want me to give any more summary of the document, or has everybody had a chance to look at it?
I just had one question, Sophie. What if we did away with the contract zone? What would happen if all of our zones were conditional? And that we didn't have a zone that was just that the existing dwelling or the existing business had to be the same all the time, like in perpetuity,
So I
unless
think-
unless the zone was changed again. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that part of the goal is to have consistency. And so, for example, I'm not sure that the Rose property, which is the Stone Manor and
Mhm.
the old,
On Main Street,
yeah, with the apartments.
right?
I'm not sure that that would have been ripe for a conditional zone. I think we wanted to dial something in very specifically with that particular parcel. Council wanted something very specific, and allowing them to do this work, they wanted extreme control over what that was going to look like. And council also got to go through this public benefit discussion. I came in on the tail end of that when I started in Orono, and there was a lot of discussion about the fact that it was a church that was falling
Mhm.
down, and there was a big liability to the town. And so I think when Kyle talked about scale and scope and the amount of control that you wanted to have and the reasonable amount of give and take or flexibility that you wanted, I think that that kind of speaks to that. I think you want to keep the contract zone as a tool. My concern, though, is we've been getting lots and lots of contract zone requests. Let's just do this, let's just do that. And I think
Right.
part of my goal in putting this together, Cheryl, was perhaps for that tool not to come out quite so frequently. And for us to instead, as Kyle's kind of walked us through, looking at the lower end of Mill Street and what maybe we should push there for some conditional zoning where the underlying is a little bit different, but you've got a little bit of control. So I don't think I'd want to get rid of contract zone. I think I just want to make it so that the public didn't expect, if they wanted to do X and the zone didn't call for it, that they could just get a contract and it would be fine, which is what I've tried to convey
Right.
in the tone of the
Okay.
document. Does that
Yeah,
make
no.
sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I was just curious if the conditional can cover it, but it doesn't necessarily, because the contract stays contract until somebody changes it, but the conditional, yeah,
Very hard to change a contract.
once it's done.
So
Okay,
once it's done, you got to have both parties agree to it. It's an amendment. It's a costly process.
right. And I guess that was the other part to why I was thinking, why are we even doing this? Why don't we just use it? Why don't we just do a conditional? I understand that they both have benefits and challenges in different areas and different ways that people want to use the land. So, yeah, or the property. Okay, no, thank you. Just curious.
Sophie, I was curious, is this procedure that you have laid out here, is this kind of common in a lot of cities and towns, or is this unique, a unique approach?
So I will tell you, I have not done an exhaustive search. A lot of the ideas that we got were generated from Freeport, and Freeport is pretty well known to have pretty good planning practices. The idea that not every application that comes in goes to council, I do think is pretty universal, that if it truly just doesn't fit anywhere, I think you see a lot of these stop at the planning office. Knowing Orono and knowing the town council, I don't think that staff, I know I wouldn't be comfortable just saying no and not having people have a place to go to kind of vet that, or to give Kyle some backup when he thinks it's a no, to have that team look through and say, yeah, that kind of makes sense, it's a no, or we think it should get a bigger look. So where we first came up with this idea of an internal kind of review, I got that from Freeport.
Yeah, I think that I really like the document. I think that it gives a lot of opportunity for folks to really feel like they've had their moment, like they've been considered seriously, and that there is kind of a mechanism in there, you know, with the small committee with the council chair and the committee chair. I mean, ultimately, if an application were denied, and then it would have to be like that the representatives of council would have to have a particular reason why they would disagree with the town planner and the town manager. So I think it's good to have that mechanism there. The only thing that I was thinking about in terms of how this document, I understand how it benefits staff and how it benefits council. I was thinking about it from the public facing side though. And, you know, for years, Orono's had a reputation, unfairly, I think, but it has been a reputation of being not friendly to business, and especially new businesses that want to come in and do something, you know, new. And so while I was reading through it, because I am fully aware of how this is supposed to work, but as I was reading through it, just the way that it's organized, I was like, wait, what? Okay, but if this happens, then wait. And I had to go back and really think about it. And that's not a criticism of your writing or anything. I'm just
Oh, it could be, that's okay.
It's a complicated process. And I think that, you know, we'll all be very familiar with it very quickly, but will the average person who wants to apply for one of these zones? So I was thinking, like, I know it's extra work, but is it worth the town's time maybe for a one-time thing to make like an infographic that's like a flow chart, like if this, then that, and then go
Absolutely.
here. So,
Absolutely, because that is what my head, I was following that in my head. I want to wait until I've got the if-thens right, and then I probably will ask somebody who's a lot more talented than I am to put that together. But I think it would be a good cover sheet. I think that cover sheet and the statement of this is given as a last resort. Don't assume if you buy a parcel and you want to do something that's not allowed in the zone that you'll just be able to get a contract. I think those two things, and I think the other piece that will be important will be the two applications, so that everybody has the same ability to get the information in front of council. And the issue for us is not about trying to limit what council say. It's more about the things that, for example, we have people who want to try to put in contracts, talk to us about contract or conditional zones for marijuana establishments. You guys thought so carefully about where marijuana establishments would be allowed. I find it pretty hard to believe that you would then offer a conditional zone for the village, just saying. So those are kind of like the things that we know would be non-starters. And most people, when they call and talk to us about it, can hear that and then say, okay, so that's not an option. But you then get, every once in a while, you get the people that want to push that through. And I think the goal is to not chew up Kyle's time getting it ready to come to committee if it truly is something that you're not going to even really consider. And it puts you guys in a bad spot when you've got somebody that is so excited about their project. And I know you guys want to say yes, but you guys know you really can't say yes. And so the goal is to try to just put it all out there. And my hope is we're also working with community development to kind of change up the pages of the website. So we'll have this information front and center that Kyle can drive people who are asking to it, which also should free up some more of his time. He he is incredibly busy, and I love it because it means we have people interested in Orono, and he won't get bored. He'll enjoy staying here. But yeah, I would like to put his workload into the more credit, the meat of what we want to accomplish.
I do think
I-
it'd be easier for the applicants as well. I mean, once they understand the process, instead of having very vague conversations like with staff about, well, you can apply to a contract zone, but what's your reasoning going to be? And I really don't think it's going to be something that we recommend. And it becomes this conversation of trying to dissuade them if it's a really bad idea, but at the same time I can't just don't want to just say no, because I want to have their opportunity. So I think it would be easier for the applicants as well if staff could just point them to a specific application like we do with site plan review or a permit or whatever, and tell them the information they need to provide, and then it's a more kind of easier review.
So I like the steps you've outlined and think it will be a nice addition to our process.
So, oh, I don't want to interrupt anybody else, but my question was, in the past, when council has created guidelines like this, when we have it all laid out with explanations, which Kyle and Mitch will be the ones that kind of, I think, work us through that, and our flow chart on the top and our applications on the back. Normally that would go to council for an adoption and put in the book as guidelines. And you guys can change your guidelines anytime you want, but it's a starting place and formal, something that the council has formally accepted. Are you on board with doing that with this one? Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, are we ready to move along to a brief town manager's update?
Yes, we are. I've lost my, so I will say that it has been a busy week already. We today took possession of an application for abatement, a very large one from Brookfield Energy. So we're going to be processing that. I will just make you aware that we will be reaching out to an appraiser that specializes in electricity and energy generation. We have used him before. I have to reach out to him tomorrow to see if he will take us on again. So we are kind of moving forward with that. Just want to make you aware that that is significant. We are also moving forward with our budget process. We have a draft budget that has hit my desk. All of the department heads have put their pieces in, so now it's my job to try to make it fit. I will say that people are doing a really nice job trying to think about what services in 2022 are going to look like, where we're kind of overlapping the return to normalcy. And folks are doing quite a bit of research, especially in Parks and Rec and Library, which are so focused on community services. So I wanted to talk to you just for a minute about what to expect with the library. Library has been closed for almost a year to the public. We've had people working behind the scenes. We're doing the curbside collection, and we've expanded digital offerings, and our new children's coordinator, which I don't know how long I get to call her new, but since I haven't been able to see her all the time, I'm going to continue that for a while, I think. She has been doing a lot of digital, like story times and efforts like that. So we plan to keep that up. we had started a carry-out window. I don't know how else to describe it, but a walk-up window where it was almost like ordering ice cream, but it was books. So you would kind of make your order in advance and come up to the window and on Saturdays, and we would have somebody there to get you what you were looking for, all social distancing. We had to close that down when everything spiked, when all the transmission numbers spiked. And Lori is looking to try to open that back up. Right now, we have an issue with a significant snowbank in the way. So I think Lori and Rob are going to be working to open that back up as soon as they can. As we look forward, I have suggested to Lori that she think about reopening more like an onion and less like a timeline. We don't know what's coming on the horizon, so kind of what is the next step going to be. So once we get the walk-up window done, the next step is probably going to be to do limited appointments to come in and use the library for a limited number of adults, and then one family or one group at a time into the children's services, children's library section. We are paying very close attention to transmission rates and what the State Library Association is putting out as best practice. So we're going to continue to follow that. Our thought is we'd rather move a little bit more slowly, but have it be sustainable. So we're not changing services back and forth. But it looks like we're going to be able to open up. How can we very systematically kind of work towards that? So that's what Lori is working on. And the Parks and Rec continues its efforts. We're still working with the university to figure out what the summer is going to look like. We don't traditionally do a lot in the spring, but Megan and Mitch have some wonderful ideas for some programming. As you may remember, instead of duplicating the Orono VZ Little League efforts, we instead work to try to support their efforts. There are groups in the general region that are working to try to bring kids back for Little League, softball, efforts like that. I testified last week on behalf of the university, asking the legislature to approve the university budget. As it stands right now, the funding would be flat from last year, which is it's not the same as keeping up, but it's definitely without the big cuts that could happen. The committee seemed quite receptive, and I think the university was appreciative of our efforts. I will share my written testimony with you guys at some point. I think that's everything. I don't know if you have any questions for me. Oh, just a reminder that on Thursday, it's in-person absentee voting. We have some incredibly dedicated volunteers that are helping us put that on right in council chambers from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then next Tuesday is the actual election where you would in-person vote between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m.
Do you have any idea how many ballots have come in already?
The last time I checked was mid last week, and I want to say we had 156 in.
Okay.
If somebody mailed theirs in, perhaps someone named Sam.
Yep.
And wanted to confirm that it was received, I could this said person, not me, could call the office and verify that it's been received.
Yep. You can either call the office or send in an email. Either way, right on the website, there's an email address, but if anybody ever has a question, an email can go into Shelley
Yep.
Crosby or to me.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Got that concierge service.
Yes. This is the benefit of being a small town.
Yeah.
Any other questions, folks, or business to discuss? Would someone like to suggest we adjourn?
I suggest we adjourn.
I second that suggestion.
Excellent. Well, we can all wave our goodbyes, agreeing that we
Everybody, stay
adjourn.
safe.
the meeting.
Dress warm tomorrow.
See you next
Aw.
week. That's right.
It's only one day.
Bye.